The Persian Gulf. The sun is rising over the water. The USS Ronald Reagan, one of the most powerful warships ever built by human hands, sits at the center of a carrier strike group, its flight deck humming with the controlled chaos of a military machine at full readiness. FA-18 Super Hornets line the deck. Radar systems sweep the horizon. 8,400 American sailors and Marines go about their duties, confident in the overwhelming power of the vessel beneath their feet. And then, without warning, the radar lights up. Not one contact, not 10, not 100. 900 inbound ballistic missiles screaming through the atmosphere at speeds that leave almost no time to react. The alarms sound. Every defense system on every ship in the strike group comes to life simultaneously. The Aegis combat system begins calculating intercept solutions at a rate no human mind could match. But there are 900 missiles. This is not a training exercise. This is not a simulation. This is the scenario that military planners in Washington, Tel Aviv, and Tehran have been wargaming for decades. And today, we are going to break it down. Every detail, every implication, every consequence. Welcome to Command Brief. Stay with me, because what you are about to hear will change how you see the balance of power in the Middle East forever. The USS Ronald Reagan, America's floating fortress. Before we talk about what could destroy the USS Ronald Reagan, we need to understand what it actually is. Because calling it just an aircraft carrier is like calling the Grand Canyon just a hole in the ground. The USS Ronald Reagan is a Nimitz-class nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. It is 1,092 feet long. That is longer than the Empire State Building is tall. It displaces over 100,000 tons of water when fully loaded. Its flight deck covers 4.5 acres. It is powered by 2 nuclear reactors that can run for over 20 years without refueling. On board, there are approximately 8,400 personnel: pilots, mechanics, weapons specialists, intelligence officers, medical staff, cooks, communications experts. An entire floating city dedicated to one purpose: projecting American military power anywhere on the planet within days. The air wing alone consists of roughly 75 to 90 aircraft: FA-18 Super Hornets, E-2 Hawkeye early warning aircraft, EA-18G Growler electronic warfare jets, and helicopters for every conceivable mission. When the Ronald Reagan is operating at full capability, it can strike targets hundreds of miles inland, provide air cover for ground forces, hunt submarines, and defend itself and its strike group simultaneously. And that strike group, the constellation of destroyers, cruisers, and submarines that always accompanies a carrier, adds another layer of firepower and defense. Each Arleigh Burke-class destroyer in the group carries the Aegis combat system, arguably the most sophisticated naval air defense system ever built. Together, they form a bubble of protection designed to defeat any threat that any Navy or Air Force on Earth could throw at them. Or so the theory goes. Because Iran has spent the last 3 decades studying American carrier operations, studying their routes, their patterns, their vulnerabilities, and they have built a missile arsenal specifically designed to overwhelm the very defenses that make the Ronald Reagan seem invincible. This is the story of how they did it, and what it would mean if they ever used it. The Shahab-3, Iran's weapon of strategic deterrence. The name Shahab comes from the Persian word for meteor, and like a meteor, the Shahab-3 is designed to strike fast, strike hard, and give its target as little warning as possible. The Shahab-3 is a medium-range ballistic missile developed by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. It is based on the North Korean Nodong missile design, which itself traces its lineage back to Soviet Scud technology. Over decades of development, Iran has modified, upgraded, and improved this missile into a weapon that military analysts take very seriously. The Shahab-3 has a range of approximately 1,300 kilometers. That means it can reach targets from Tehran to Tel Aviv, from Iranian launch sites to American bases across the Gulf region, and, critically, to naval vessels operating in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. Now, the Shahab-3 is not a precision weapon. Its circular error probable, the military term for accuracy, is measured in hundreds of meters, not dozens. Half of the missiles fired will land within roughly 2,500 meters of the intended target. Against a city or a large military base, that is acceptable. Against a moving ship in open water, it is a serious limitation. But here is where Iran's strategy becomes genuinely terrifying. Iran does not rely on precision. Iran relies on mass. Military doctrine calls this saturation attack. The logic is brutally simple. If your individual weapons are not accurate enough to guarantee a hit, fire so many of them that the math changes entirely. Even with a 10% hit rate against a moving target, 900 missiles mean 90 impacts. No ship on Earth survives 90 ballistic missile impacts. And Iran has been building toward this capability for decades. By 2024 and 2025, Iran's total missile inventory across all types had grown to an estimated 2,000 to 2,500 missiles. The Shahab-3 remains a backbone of that force, supplemented by more advanced systems like the Khorramshahr, the Sejil, and the hypersonic Fatah. The missile is liquid-fueled, which means it requires preparation time before launch. This is a vulnerability. It gives satellite surveillance systems a chance to detect the fueling process. But Iran has invested heavily in underground launch facilities, hardened bunkers, and mobile launchers that complicate early detection. Iran has constructed what military analysts call missile cities, vast underground complexes tunneled into mountains and hillsides, where hundreds of missiles can be stored, prepared, and launched while remaining protected from airstrikes. At least 24 major missile sites have been identified in western Iran alone, with extensive tunnel systems that can survive all but the most powerful bunker-busting munitions. This is not a primitive, improvised weapons program. This is a sophisticated, decades-long investment in strategic deterrence, built specifically to make America think twice before sending its carriers into the Persian Gulf. The strategy: how Iran plans to sink a carrier. Let's think through the scenario carefully, because understanding Iran's strategy requires us to think like Iranian military planners. Iran knows it cannot defeat the United States in a conventional, force-on-force military engagement. America's military is simply too large, too technologically advanced, and too experienced. So Iran has never tried to build a military that can beat America in a fair fight. Instead, Iran has built a military designed to make the cost of fighting Iran unacceptably high. This is called asymmetric warfare, and the aircraft carrier is the centerpiece of Iran's asymmetric calculus. Here is why. An American carrier strike group is the most visible, the most powerful, and, in Iranian strategic thinking, the most symbolic expression of American power projection. If you can threaten the carrier, you threaten the entire foundation of American military dominance in the region. And if you can actually sink one, even hypothetically, even in a war game, you fundamentally change the strategic equation. Iran's anti-carrier strategy has multiple layers. First, there are the ballistic missiles, the Shahab-3 and its more advanced cousins. These are the long-range punch, capable of reaching carriers operating far out to sea. Second, there are anti-ship cruise missiles, weapons like the Noor, which is Iran's version of the Chinese C-802, designed to fly low over the water and strike ships at close range. Third, there are swarms of fast attack boats operated by the Revolutionary Guard's naval forces, small, agile, and capable of launching missiles and torpedoes in coordinated waves that overwhelm point defense systems. And fourth, there are submarines. Iran operates a fleet of conventional submarines that could threaten carriers operating in the confined, shallow waters of the Persian Gulf. The combined threat of all four layers simultaneously is what makes Iranian military planners so confident in their anti-access area denial strategy. No single layer would be sufficient. All four together create a problem that even the most sophisticated carrier strike group would struggle to manage. And at the center of it all, providing the long-range, high-volume firepower that makes the entire strategy possible, sits the Shahab-3 and its missile family. 900 missiles, launched simultaneously from dispersed locations across western and southern Iran, arriving at the carrier strike group within minutes of each other from multiple directions at varying altitudes and speeds. This is the nightmare scenario, and it is not as far-fetched as you might think. The defense. Can America stop 900 missiles? Now let's talk about the defense side, because America is not helpless in this scenario. Far from it. The Aegis combat system, deployed on American destroyers and cruisers, is one of the most capable air defense systems ever built. It can track hundreds of targets simultaneously and engage multiple threats at the same time. The SM-3 interceptor missile, launched from Aegis ships, is designed specifically to shoot down ballistic missiles in the mid-course phase of their flight, before they reach their terminal dive toward the target. A carrier strike group typically has 2 to 4 Aegis-equipped surface ships. Each ship carries a limited number of interceptor missiles. Even in the most optimistic scenario, a strike group might have 100 to 150 interceptors available for ballistic missile defense. Against 900 incoming missiles, that is not enough. This is the mathematical reality that American defense planners have been grappling with for years. The Aegis system is extraordinarily capable, but it has a finite magazine, and Iran's strategy is explicitly designed to exhaust that magazine. There is also the question of decoys and countermeasures. Iran has invested in technology that makes distinguishing real warheads from dummy missiles more difficult. If even a fraction of those 900 launches are decoys designed to force the Aegis system to waste interceptors on non-threats, the mathematics get even worse for the defense. The carrier itself has its own close-in defense systems. The Phalanx CIWS, which uses a rapid-fire cannon to destroy incoming missiles at very close range, and the Rolling Airframe Missile System for short-range intercepts. But these are last-ditch defenses, designed to catch the threats that slip through the outer layers. Against a coordinated saturation attack of 900 ballistic missiles arriving from multiple directions simultaneously, the honest assessment of most independent military analysts is that some would get through. How many is the question. And even a handful of ballistic missile hits on a carrier could be catastrophic. A Shahab-3 carries a warhead weighing between 750 kilograms and 1 metric ton. At terminal velocity, diving down toward its target at speeds exceeding a kilometer per second, that warhead delivers an impact equivalent to a small bomb. 1 hit could disable critical systems. 3 hits could put a carrier out of action. More than that, and you are talking about catastrophic structural damage, fires that could reach the fuel and weapons storage, and potential loss of the vessel. 8,400 Americans stranded in hostile waters. This is not just a military scenario, it is a humanitarian catastrophe. It is a political earthquake, and it is a moment that would reshape the entire global order. Iran's missile cities, the hidden arsenal. One of the most remarkable and least understood aspects of Iran's missile program is the sheer scale of its underground infrastructure. Iran has spent decades and billions of dollars constructing a network of underground missile facilities that military experts describe as genuinely impressive in their scale and sophistication. These are not simple bunkers. They are entire underground cities, tunneled deep into the mountains of western Iran, hardened against airstrikes, equipped with their own power generation, ventilation, and logistics systems. At least 24 major missile sites have been identified in western Iran, with major clusters around the Kermanshah region, including the Konesh Canyon complex with its extensive tunnel bunkers. Other facilities extend into Loristan province and the Zagros mountain range. In the south, near the Strait of Hormuz, facilities at Haji Abad in Hormozgan province are specifically oriented toward Gulf targets. These facilities serve multiple purposes. They protect missiles from preemptive airstrikes. They allow missiles to be fueled and prepared for launch in a protected environment, removing the visibility that liquid-fueled missiles normally present during above-ground preparation. And they allow Iran to disperse its missile force across a wide geographic area, making it impossible for any adversary to destroy the entire arsenal in a single strike. The United States and Israel have targeted these facilities repeatedly. In March 2026, combined American and Israeli forces struck 4 key Iranian ballistic missile production facilities and 29 missile launch bases. The Kojir military complex alone had at least 88 structures destroyed. Experts assess that these strikes caused severe damage to Iran's ability to produce short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles. But even after these devastating strikes, Iran retained significant missile capability. The dispersal strategy worked. Not every base was destroyed. Not every missile was eliminated. And Iran's production infrastructure, while badly damaged, was not completely destroyed. This is the core challenge of dealing with Iran's missile arsenal. You cannot simply bomb it away. The underground facilities are too deep, too hardened, and too numerous. You can degrade it. You can slow its growth. But eliminating it entirely would require a military campaign of a scale and duration that carries its own enormous risks and costs. Iran understands this, and it has built its entire deterrence strategy around it. The geopolitical earthquake. What happens after? Let's step back from the immediate military scenario and think about what happens after. Because the sinking of an American aircraft carrier, if such a thing were to occur, would not just be a military event. It would be one of the most significant geopolitical moments in modern history. The last time an American capital ship was sunk in combat was World War II, the USS Indianapolis in 1945. Before that, the USS Yorktown at Midway in 1942. In the 8 decades since, the American aircraft carrier has been essentially untouchable, a symbol of invincible American military power that has shaped the entire post-war global order. If that symbol were shattered, if 8,400 American sailors were stranded in hostile waters, their ship destroyed by Iranian missiles, the political, strategic, and psychological consequences would be almost impossible to overstate. In Washington, the pressure for a massive military response would be overwhelming. No American president could survive politically without ordering a devastating retaliatory strike. The question would not be whether to respond, but how far to go. Strikes on Iranian missile facilities, strikes on the Iranian military infrastructure, strikes on the Revolutionary Guard, potentially strikes on Iranian leadership. But retaliation carries its own risks. Iran has allies and proxies across the Middle East. Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis in Yemen, Shia militias in Iraq. A major American military response to Iran could trigger simultaneous attacks on American forces and interests across the entire region. American troops in Iraq and Syria. American bases in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bahrain. The Israeli population. Gulf oil infrastructure that supplies a significant fraction of the world's energy. Oil prices would spike immediately and dramatically. Markets around the world would go into freefall. The global economy, still recovering from the strain of years of geopolitical disruption, would face a shock of potentially historic proportions. China would be watching carefully. Russia would be watching carefully. Every authoritarian government that has been wondering whether American power can be challenged would be drawing lessons from what they observe. And NATO allies would face an agonizing choice: stand with America in a conflict that could rapidly escalate beyond the Middle East, or step back and risk the unraveling of the entire Western alliance system. This is why the scenario of 900 Iranian missiles targeting the Ronald Reagan is not just a military hypothetical. It is a window into the potential fracture points of the entire international order. And it is why American military planners, Iranian strategists, and geopolitical analysts around the world spend so much time thinking about it. The 8,400 sailors, the human dimension. In all of this strategic analysis, all of this talk of missiles and interceptors and geopolitical consequences, it is easy to lose sight of what is most important: the human beings. 8,400 American sailors and Marines, men and women from every state in the Union, from small towns in Iowa and big cities in California, from military families who have served for generations, and first-generation Americans who joined the Navy as a path to citizenship and a better life. They are mechanics who spend their days keeping fighter jets airborne. They are pilots who launch off the carrier deck and land back on a moving runway in the dark. They are cooks who feed thousands of people 3 times a day. They are doctors and nurses who staff the ship's hospital. They are communications specialists, intelligence analysts, weapons technicians, and the hundreds of other specialists that a modern warship requires. In the scenario we are discussing, these 8,400 people would be in the middle of an unimaginable crisis. Their ship damaged or sinking, fires spreading through the lower decks, communications disrupted. The strike group working desperately to rescue survivors from the water while simultaneously defending against continued threats. The rescue operation alone would be one of the largest and most complex in naval history. Ships from across the region would be diverted. Aircraft would fly search and rescue missions around the clock. Every available asset would be thrown into saving American lives. And even in the best case, even if the majority of those 8,400 people were rescued safely, the trauma would be profound. Not just for the survivors, but for their families, their communities, and for the entire American military. This is the human cost of great power conflict. And it is a cost that policymakers in Washington and Tehran both need to keep clearly in mind as they navigate the dangerous waters of Middle Eastern geopolitics. Because at the end of the day, military hardware is replaceable. Geopolitical positions shift over time. But the lives of those 8,400 sailors, those cannot be replaced. Those losses would be felt for generations. Iran's calculation. Why they built this capability. Here is a question worth asking. Why has Iran invested so heavily in this specific capability? Why spend decades and billions of dollars building a missile arsenal that is specifically designed to threaten American aircraft carriers? The answer reveals something important about how Iran sees the world and its place in it. Iran's leadership, particularly the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, which controls the missile program, operates from a strategic framework built on the lessons of the 1980s, the Iran-Iraq War. The 1988 American naval intervention in the Gulf, when the U.S. Navy destroyed Iranian oil platforms and sank Iranian ships in Operation Praying Mantis. The experience of watching American military power dismantled Iraq's conventional forces in 1991 in a matter of weeks. The lesson they drew from all of this is straightforward. Conventional military power cannot match America. Trying to build an air force or a navy that can go head-to-head with the United States is futile. The only way to deter American military action is to make the cost of that action unacceptably high. And the aircraft carrier is the key to that calculation. Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, has said publicly that Iran possesses weapons capable of sending American carriers to the bottom of the sea. This is not idle boasting. It is a deliberate strategic message intended to make American commanders think twice before sailing a carrier into the Persian Gulf. The logic is deterrence. The same logic that drove the nuclear arms race between the United States and the Soviet Union. If you can credibly threaten to destroy what your adversary values most, you create leverage. You make them hesitate. You make them calculate the cost. Has it worked? In a sense, yes. American carriers do not operate freely in the Persian Gulf the way they once did. The threat environment has changed the operational calculus for American naval commanders. The confined, shallow waters of the Gulf, where Iranian anti-ship missiles, submarines, and fast attack boats can operate most effectively, are now considered high-risk environments for major surface combatants. Iran has achieved a degree of deterrence. Not complete deterrence, not immunity from American military action, but enough uncertainty, enough risk, that the calculations are more complex than they used to be. And that, from Iran's perspective, is exactly the point. The broader war, US and Israel strike back. Of course, this scenario does not exist in isolation. Iran's missile capabilities have already been put to the test in recent conflicts, and the results have been illuminating for both sides. During the 12-day war between Iran and Israel in June 2025, Iran fired approximately 550 ballistic missiles over the entire conflict. This was Iran's largest single missile barrage in its history at that point, and yet the combined American and Israeli missile defense systems intercepted the vast majority of them. Arrow, THAAD, and Patriot batteries worked together to create a layered defense that proved more effective than many analysts had predicted. But it also exposed vulnerabilities on both sides. Iran demonstrated that it could generate and sustain high-volume missile attacks. America and Israel demonstrated that their defenses, while capable, are not impenetrable, and that they have a finite capacity for interceptors that can be exhausted by sustained, large-scale attacks. In late February 2026, the United States and Israel launched Operation Epic Fury, a massive combined strike campaign against Iranian military infrastructure. The scope was historic. 4 key Iranian ballistic missile production facilities were struck. 29 missile launch bases were hit. The Imam Ali missile base in Loristan province, one of Iran's most important, was struck multiple times with bunker-busting munitions. The damage was severe. Experts assessed that Iran's ability to produce short-range and medium-range ballistic missiles had been significantly degraded. Tunnel entrances were destroyed. Production equipment was damaged. Personnel were killed. But Iran's arsenal was not eliminated. Iran had dispersed too effectively. The underground facilities were too numerous, and Iran had rebuilt its stockpile rapidly after previous conflicts. This is the fundamental tension at the heart of the Iran missile problem. Military strikes can damage and delay, but they cannot permanently solve the problem without a level of sustained military campaign that carries risks of its own. Regional escalation, civilian casualties, and the potential for exactly the kind of carrier-threatening response that everyone is trying to avoid. The standoff continues. The missiles remain. And the Persian Gulf remains one of the most dangerous bodies of water on the planet. Outro. We started this video with an image. The USS Ronald Reagan sitting in the Persian Gulf. 900 missiles inbound. 8,400 American lives hanging in the balance. That image is a hypothetical. The Ronald Reagan has not been sunk. The 900 missiles have not been fired. We are not, as of today, in a hot war between the United States and Iran. But the capability exists. The missiles are real. The carrier is real. The tension is real. And the strategic calculations on both sides that could, under the wrong circumstances, lead to exactly this scenario, those are very real indeed. What this scenario tells us is something important about the world we live in. The era of unchallenged American naval dominance, the era when an aircraft carrier could sail anywhere in the world and face no credible threat, that era is over. Not because America has grown weaker, but because adversaries have grown smarter. They have studied American power, they have identified its vulnerabilities, and they have built specific capabilities designed to exploit those vulnerabilities. Iran is not the only country doing this. China has built an entire military doctrine around denying American carriers access to the waters around Taiwan. Russia has invested in hypersonic missiles specifically designed to defeat American naval defenses. The world's authoritarian powers have concluded that the path to challenging American dominance runs through the aircraft carrier. Understanding this is not defeatism. It is realism. America's military remains the most powerful on Earth. Its alliances remain unmatched. Its technological edge, while narrowing in some areas, remains substantial. But the world has changed. The threats have evolved. And the scenarios that military planners once considered unthinkable are now very much part of the strategic conversation. The USS Ronald Reagan sails on. The Shahab-3 missiles sit in their underground bases, waiting. And somewhere in the Persian Gulf, the most dangerous standoff in the world continues. This has been Command Brief. If this video gave you a clearer picture of the forces shaping our world, hit that subscribe button and share this with someone who needs to understand what is really happening. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think America's carriers are still safe? Can Iran's missile threat be neutralized? Let's talk about it. Stay informed, stay sharp. Until next time.